Hi everyone and welcome, this is the Apostate Prophet. As many of you know, we are currently at a time of the year where followers of the Islamic religion shed a lot of blood. No, I'm not talking about the usual stuff. I'm talking about the sacrifice feast, which started 2 days ago and it's still ongoing. Let me just give you a brief summary of the feast before we go on. The sacrifice feast is widely known as al-Adha, which means literally feast of the sacrifice. In the Islamic lunar calendar, the sacrifice feast takes place in the last month of the calendar, a month that is also known as Dhul Hijjah, which stands for month of the pilgrimage. The month is considered very holy, and the Islamic pilgrimage, where Muslims around the world visit the Hijaz region for Islamic rituals such as the circling of the Kaaba, occurs at the beginning of this month. On the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, this pilgrimage takes place, and the end of it, within the 10th day, is marked by the sacrifice feast, which lasts 3 days until the 13th of the month. Since the Islamic lunar calendar is only 354 or 355 days, while our Gregorian solar calendar has 365 days, the sacrifice feast falls back 10 or 11 days in our calendar every year. The background of the sacrifice feast lies in the alleged faith and actions of Abraham. It is based on a biblical story where God talks to Abraham and tells Abraham to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac in a burnt offering. A burnt offering was a sacrifice where a living being, the subject of the sacrifice, is placed on an altar, slaughtered and burned completely or almost completely as an offering to deities. So Abraham goes to the place where he is supposed to make the sacrifice, he builds an altar, ties Isaac down and places wood on him to burn him. When he is about to slaughter Isaac, an angel appears, stops him, and tells Abraham not to touch Isaac because he proved his faith already by being ready to sacrifice his beloved son. Then a sheep appears behind him, whereafter Abraham unties Isaac and sacrifices the sheep instead. Afterwards, God speaks to Abraham and tells him that God will make a great nation of Isaac because of Abraham's sacrifice. Historians believe, due to major evidence, that human sacrifice was rather common in Abraham's time. Therefore, many scholars in Judaism believe that this story serves as a lesson to humans not to sacrifice humans but to sacrifice animals instead. The Islamic story is almost entirely similar, only it doesn't provide as much detail as the Bible does, because the Quran never provides that much detail, it just rhymes. And the Quran doesn't specify which son it was, which is why early Islamic scholars believed it was Isaac, but later the general belief became that it was Ishmael instead. Because as explained before in other videos, according to biblical belief, Isaac inherits his father's legacy, whereas in Islam, Ishmael is suddenly the favored one that everything is focused on, while Isaac is also a prophet but not as important as Ishmael. Most likely because Ishmael is believed to be the ancestor of Muhammad, the Arab nation, and symbolically of the Muslims, which doesn't seem to be true at all, because today we know that Arabs are not a nation that have a common ancestor. It is a rather cultural group. Also, according to the Bible, Ishmael was not with Abraham at the time, which makes it impossible for the subject of the sacrifice to be Ishmael, not Isaac, but whatever. Anyway, the Islamic faith references this biblical story, which it changes for its own comfort, and then orders all Muslims to sacrifice animals every year, because why not? I know, I would love to make a more intelligent connection between Abraham and the Islamic sacrifice, but there is no connection I can make because Islam offers none. The Quran tells the story, then changes the topic, and at some completely different point tells Muslims to offer sacrifices. Apparently Muhammad taught his Muslim followers further about how Allah came up with the sacrifice idea, but Allah didn't bother including that in the Quran as it seems. What is interesting is that fundamental Islamic sources suggest that animal sacrifice was quite common among the pre-Islamic pagans, and that the sacrifice ritual introduced by Islam was nothing new, it just changed a bit. Muslims believe that by offering an animal sacrifice during Eid al-Adha, they commemorate Abraham's sacrifice and make a sacrifice of their own. It's funny to equate one to the other, though, because Abraham offered his own son as a sacrifice to God to prove his faith, while Muslims only offer animals symbolically, which is their property. So they just buy an animal with some money that they have and just sacrifice it to God. What a sacrifice. But also, sacrificing a living being, whether it is a human or an animal, what exactly does that symbolize? Why does Allah want it from everyone who is alive today? As mentioned, sacrifices were made before Abrahamic religion to other gods, because humans believed that they have to give their god something, and then they went on and sacrificed humans and animals. How does this almighty, all-knowing Allah specifically get pleased by slaughtering some animals? I understand that Allah doesn't need it, and that it doesn't do anything to him. But why does a believer today need to make such a sacrifice and fill halls, streets, and squares with blood that only helps spreading filth and diseases? Is this really what Almighty Allah wants from you to prove your faith? How exactly does that prove faith? To whom does it prove your faith? I can't believe in such a nonsensical ritual even a bit. What is more controversial about the slaughtering is how the slaughtering is done. It must be done quickly, with a sharp knife, by cutting the arteries on both sides, while not decapitating it and harming the spinal cord. Then the animal must suffer, bleed out, and die. Any other intervention is forbidden. But nowadays, animals can simply be slaughtered by putting them to sleep with bolts first. That way they feel no pain, no fear, and the slaughter can be done quite easily. Considering that animals feel pain, even according to Islam, that should also be a plus for Islam. But no, Muslims reject the practice of inducing unconsciousness and slaughter them while they are fully awake and screaming. In many countries, Muslims have been challenged with laws because the ritual slaughter is seen as barbaric animal abuse. But Muslims simply continue that practice because Muhammad's words are more important than what the animal feels. But let's forget about all of this. Let's focus on the sacrifice feast, where very weird practices are done. There are two other things that I want to talk about. Have you ever seen these weird pillars and wondered what they represent? Well, the Islamic story of Abraham and Ishmael contains one more thing, which is when Abraham was ordered to sacrifice his son Ishmael, Satan appeared and tried to stop Abraham from doing so. Satan usually appears to be the more reasonable person in Islam. Then Gabriel came and told Abraham to attack Satan. So Abraham threw stones at Satan, and Satan was so scared of stones, although he's made of fire, and ran away. This happened 3 times, which is why Muslims establish these stones at Mecca that are supposed to represent Satan, and Muslims throw stones at Stone Satan several times during their pilgrimage and the sacrifice. Yes. As you can tell from this image already, this is one of the most dangerous practices during the pilgrimage, because people move in large crowds quickly and aggressively, and throw stones that can miss the pillars. Multiple incidents occurred in the past where the pilgrims killed each other in masses during this practice, by accidentally trampling each other or hitting others with stones. In some incidents, thousands of people died. Another practice is the shaving of the head. According to the Quran and the Hadith, Muslims are required to shave their heads during the pilgrimage, around the sacrifice, while women cut off some of their hair. The shaving of the head is also seen as a form of sacrifice, and as a sign that you are obeying Allah. I don't have much to say about this practice, except that it looks like a funny thing to do for a little holiday. Spend thousands of dollars, go to Mecca, circle this cube, shave your head, stone a stone, slaughter animals, and cry Allahu Akbar while doing all of this. Quite a nice summer getaway in 2018. Speaking of 2018, this year Allah doesn't seem to be pleased with the pilgrimage at all. Or something else is going on, which is why Allah did this to his house in a heavy storm that he brought. Looks like he's trying to remind everyone that the Kaaba is just a simple building made of rocks, just like so many others in the world. Or... anyway, I hope everyone is having a great feast of the sacrifice. Thanks for watching. Allah needs more blood. Happy sacrifice feasts. And yeah, stay away from Islam.